Good evening, friends. Welcome to another episode of Storytime. I just wanted to start by introducing all my friends here. I don't know if I've done this already, so if I have, forgive me, I'm going to introduce them again. This is Gluteus Muttonus. This over here is Chubbs. This is Gandalf. And this is a very special friend of mine. This is Michael. Michael was a gift to me when I was born by my godfather, my Uncle Michael. So he's been with me for my entire life. So very old stuffed animal, very old friend of mine. Anyway, let's go ahead and get on with our story. Once again, we're reading Norse myths, and what we're going to do today is read about the first clashes of the gods. And I'll be sure to show any pictures that come up. The two groups of gods living in the cosmos did not trust each other very much. Rather, they were wary to the extreme. One day, a witch named Gulvig, who lived with the Vanir in Vanaheim, visited the Aesir living in Asgard. No one's really sure why, but Gulvig walked into Odin's hall and blathered about gold, about how it glistened and how much she loved it. The Aesir listened with growing disdain and finally did the unforgivable. They jammed a bunch of spears into her. Then they tossed her into a fire and burned her to death. All she had done was annoy them with her incessant talk, and look what they did to her. But Gulvig stepped right back out of the flame, alive and whole. Then a second time they threw her in, and a second time she stepped back out. And yet a third time. By that point, the astonished Aesir realized that this witch had powers beyond anything that they'd ever dreamed of. So they moved aside and let her wander wherever she wished in the halls of Asgard. Troublemakers followed her. The more wicked the followers, the more they admired Gulvig. Word got back to the Vanir how dreadfully the Aesir had treated Gulvig. Vengeance seemed a duty, and they prepared for war. From his high seat in Valaskov, Odin saw what was happening over in Vanaheim. He saw them sharpening spears and polishing swords, so he prepared a preemptive strike. And the Aesir cast the first spear, but the Vanir were already surging forward on their mounts, trampling the fields between the two worlds. It's a little bit warm. I'm going to take my hood off. The battle went on and on. That's how battles go between gods. Both sides are immensely powerful after all, but the longer the battle endured, the clearer it became to all that a victor was in fact unlikely. The gods wearied of the futility of this dreary war. Finally, the leaders of the Vanir and the Aesir sat down to hash things out. They couldn't agree on almost anything, but they wanted so much just to end the plague of war that they drew up a truce. And to show their sincerity, they exchanged hostages. 2 from each group would go to live with the other group. The Vanir sent the very wealthy god Njord and his son Frey to Asgard. Frey's twin sister Freya and Kvasir, the wisest Vanir, accompanied those two on their journey and ended up staying there. The Aesir welcomed them honorably. Njord and Frey were appointed high priests to preside over sacrifices. Freya became a sacrificial priestess, and she taught the gods all the spiritual, medical, and magical knowledge that she had, which was indeed considerable. The Aesir, for their part, sent Honir and Mimir to Vanaheim. Honir was strong and big. He certainly looked like he'd make a fine leader, and Mimir, though he was a giant, was considered the wisest of the Aesir. Definitely comparable to Kvasir. All seemed good to the Vanir. They put Honir in a position of power, and Mimir stood to his right and advised him. Together they made shrewd decisions. But if Mimir left Honir's side, the tall and handsome Honir turned silent. When asked a question, he refused to speak. The Vanir felt cheated. In fury, they cut off Mimir's head and sent it back to Odin. Why they cut off poor Mimir's head because of closed-mouthed Honir is unfathomable. Gods, they have their own way of doing things. Odin was bereft, for Mimir had been a fine and true friend. He held that severed head in his arms and crooned to it. Then he coated it with herbs that would retard decay and saying magic incantations over it. The head of Mimir regained its power of speech, and thenceforth became a font of wisdom for Odin. And thus the first war of the cosmos began and ended, but it was not the last. Humans waged war often, and the gods treated the corpses of men who died in battle very well. They did not go to hell, no. Half of them went to Asgard to live in a special hall called Valhalla, where spear shafts served as rafters and the roof was thatched with shields. At the western door lurked a wolf with an eagle hovering overhead. To arrive in Valhalla, the fallen warriors had to cross a large and noisy river. Once there, Odin welcomed them heartily. He had straw sewn on the benches in the hall to make them comfortable. He had all the goblets polished, for he already foresaw needing these warriors someday, he knew. There would be a final great battle among the gods. Humans, monsters, giants, everyone, the all-consuming Ragnarok, warriors would be invaluable. Odin's helper maids, the Valkyries, put on their silver helmets from which their golden hair flowed out, and red corset armor that emphasized their beautiful bodies, and they rode on white horses through air over the battlefields below. They must have appeared both terrifying and alluring to these sweaty, exhausted men as they lay dying. The Valkyries carried the chosen dead up to Valhalla. And what a fine routine met these warriors there in Valhalla. Every night they feasted on overflowing platters of pork from the beast Serhrimnir, roasted in the cauldron Eldhimrir by the soot-covered cook Andhimrir. They drank never-ending mead that came from the udders of the goat Heidrun, the one that ate the tender shoots of the tree Yggdrasil. Every day they battled together, and those who fell in these heavenly battles simply rose again at the end of the day and marched through the 540 doors of the hall to join the feast anew, since everything regenerated of its own accord. The other half of the dead on the battlefield were gathered up by the priestess Freya, and the Vanir goddess who had taught everyone in Asgard so much about the wonders of the cosmos. She brought them to her heavenly field called Folkvang, where they too were groomed for the final battle, Ragnarok. It's as though right from the beginning of time, everyone was preparing for the end of it all. So here's to you. I hope you have a lovely night, and thank you for joining me again.